Welcome to the Legal Merry-Go-Round.
Welcome back to the Legal Merry-Go-Round with attorney Paul Samakow, a longtime personal injury lawyer helping injured people throughout the Maryland, Virginia area get treated fairly after an accident. I'm Shameika Rhymes, and today we're talking about concussions and traumatic brain injuries. Paul will explain why these cases are often misunderstood and what makes them different from other types of car accident injuries. Welcome back, Paul.
Hi, how are you, Shameika?
Doing well. How are you doing?
Good, thank you.
Well, Paul, after a car accident, what are the early signs of a concussion or traumatic brain injury that people might overlook?
This is a wonderful question, and you are so right. It's often overlooked.
Mhm.
Individuals and those around them need to be very aware of changes in behavior. Things like individuals saying what when they didn't hear something. That could be a problem that a neurological problem. It could be a brain injury that's affecting hearing, vision, concentration, dizziness, headache. These are the things that, relatively minor most of the time, and they clear up typically very quickly. But if they persist, this could be good evidence of a brain injury. I mean, it sounds horrible, but again, individuals need to be concerned. And if this persists, they need to go not just to the family doctor, but to a neurologist.
Why do brain injuries sometimes not show up clearly on imaging like CT scans or MRIs?
They don't show up because those tests are not sophisticated enough. The standard is what's called a PET scan, PET, and a neurologist will order that if symptoms are appropriate and suggest that there might be an issue.
Wow, okay. Well, can someone still have a brain injury even if they don't think that they hit their head in an accident?
Oh, yes. So I'm going to get a little bit technical here, but I'm going to try and keep it on a level that, we can understand. The inside of your skull is not smooth. It is rigid. It's kind of like craters on the moon. And when a violent force causes your head to go side to side or back and forth, your brain often will come into contact with a sharp edge in the inside of the skull. And this can cause a small piercing or a rupture of any size, and there could be bleeding. And these movements of your head do not require that your head hit the windshield or the side window or even the seat rest. Just simply the force of the impact alone can cause any number of problems where the brain has been tossed around. Imagine like the yolk of an egg. You don't actually have to hit the egg on a surface, but if you shake that egg hard enough, you could break the egg on the inside, the yolk on the inside of that shell of that egg.
I think that's a great description because now I can picture exactly what you mean. Um, but how do symptoms like headaches, memory issues, irritability, or even sleep problems become part of proving a case?
It is just simply going to be a function of the observations of those around the individual who has been injured, the individual's own description and history, and of course, medical testing. I have a client many years ago who was a top level government employee who was charged with the most detailed of work that you could possibly imagine. And in her home life, she was a concert pianist.
Mhm.
After the injury, it was very clear, slowly, slowly, slowly over weeks and into months, that the performance on the job was significantly reduced. She wasn't remembering things. Even when she would go to the grocery store, she had to look at the little display to see that the check that she had to write was $103.95, and she had to look up and down 4 or 5 times to remember what the amount would be that she would write on her check. And then, she would go and sit down and try and play the piano, and she couldn't remember, the notes to songs that she had played for decades. So this is um, this is the type of thing that would be evidence in a courtroom that would prove up that someone has had this type of an injury, and then you contrast it with the way they used to be,
Why are these types of injuries often minimized by insurance companies?
because there's very little testing that can prove it. But I haven't seen too many examples of good brain injury cases with the evidence types that I've just described that juries dismiss. Just because there isn't an x-ray that shows you there's a broken bone doesn't mean the bone isn't broken.
Very true. So, how important is it to see the right type of specialist when a brain injury is suspected?
Oh, great question. Thank you so much for asking. It is critical. Your family doctor could be a wonderful person. They put their arm around you, hug you, ask about your spouse and your dog and the vacation, and they're great people, but they are not trained to understand, much less treat a brain injury. And this is why it's critical to go to start off with a neurologist and even a neurosurgeon. That doesn't mean you're going to be having surgery, but these people are even a little bit more attuned to what might be going on. And so, you say, well, I don't know a neurologist. Attorneys do. And
Mhm.
this is a case that clearly, you don't want to be handling on your own if you've been injured. You need the assistance of a professional.
Well, should someone go after the accident go to the ER if they suspect they might have a concussion, or should they, call the attorney first and then say, "Hey, I think, I may have an injury, because I'm already having these symptoms. I don't know how long it takes sometimes to show up."
Well, I advocate always getting medical care. Getting an
Mhm.
attorney is a great idea and it should be done early in the process, but your health is a lot more important than calling the other person's insurance company and making a claim. There's plenty of time for that. The time is of the essence when you have injuries. You want to get them addressed and treated if needed.
Okay. Well, what challenges come up when symptoms don't appear until days after the crash?
The insurance companies will jump on that and say, well, I mean, he didn't black out at the scene. I mean, so they'll use any excuse they can to try to discount or diminish the seriousness of any injury, not just a brain injury. Um, a lot of times, it's not the same vertical that we're talking about, but I had a client who, um, you know, had had a very serious issue, and it just was a slow bleed that was developing over time. And a month and a half later, his wife found him on the bathroom floor. So, he didn't have any symptoms until then because it just, they didn't present.
But can you walk us through a situation where brain injury wasn't taken seriously at first, but then later it became central to the case?
Well, yeah, I mean, people tend to complain about that which is apparent. I have a broken arm, I have a broken wrist, my neck hurts. I can only move it this way, but I can't move it that way. I can't stand up or sit down out of a chair without excruciating pain in my lower back. So, this is what they talk about when they go to the medical care providers. Um, and not every medical care provider, unfortunately, is going to do a complete and thorough assessment of every possible issue. They are trained to address what is obvious and what their patient complains about. So, they can see there's a broken wrist. They can, touch the patient's neck and it hurts. They can see the patient can only move their neck a little bit. These are the things they're going to address. Maybe, hopefully, they'll say, and you're having other problems. There's a whole list of neurologic issues and markers that might, offer that there is a brain injury. I mean, we look at all the functions of what the brain controls immediately: vision, sight, smell, balance, hearing, dizziness, concentration, all of these things, taste. Does a family doctor or an emergency room doctor ask about these? Probably not. But if they're persistent, more than 2 or 3 or 4 days, then it's appropriate to go back to an appropriate professional. And even if it is the family doctor, and say, hey, these things are going on, and ask for a referral to a neurologist where things can be more fully developed and more fully documented. And if they're not documented early on, then the insurance company is going to say, well, it didn't exist. This is something, how do we know, he didn't fall down a flight of stairs?
Mhm.
Oh, okay, how do we know that we didn't go to the moon? I mean, they'll
Right.
throw anything at us that they can to try and diminish or defeat the claim, but evidence is evidence. So, those kinds of claims typically will prevail if they are addressed in a reasonable period of time.
Well, Paul, for someone who feels off weeks after an accident, but they can't quite explain what's going on, what should they be doing?
Going to the doctor. I mean, that's it. Um, I hate to sound, like stupid, but an insurance company, if they can, will not even acknowledge that you're alive until you show them your birth certificate. I mean, you know, that's a little bit, out there, but if it isn't documented, it doesn't exist. That's the
Right.
general rule. And that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Again, because the x-ray doesn't show an arm fracture doesn't mean there's not an arm fracture. But the longer you wait to get the proof medically and the documentation medically, the more suspicious and the less credible it becomes. So, again, my client that had the brain bleed that didn't manifest until almost a month and a half later, there was no doctor under the sun that would have said that it's not related to the accident. They all said it was, and the insurance company had to pay for it. Despite their claiming and screaming that, no, how do we know that, he didn't fall down the stairs?
Well, thank you so much for breaking this down for us today. This has been super informative.
I like your questions here. It's one of the things that is most of concern in some cases, and it's not identified and it causes problems just on a medical level. I mean, forget the legal. We want people to be well. We want them to get medical care, and they should get it as soon as there's an issue or problem.
Absolutely. Thank you again, Paul, for coming back and breaking this down.
Super. Thank you for having me again.
Well, that's it for today's episode of the Legal Merry-Go-Round. If you or a loved one may be dealing with a concussion or traumatic brain injury after a crash in the Maryland, Virginia area, attorney Paul Samakow and his team are here to help you get treated fairly. To learn more or schedule a free strategy session, visit samakowlaw.com. And don't forget to like, leave a review, and share this episode with someone who might need it.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.